All right, so are you ready to dive deep? Today we're going to tackle how to improve your English speaking skills.
Oh, excellent.
But not just like the usual, grammar drills and vocab lists. We're going deeper.
Ooh.
We're talking about how to think in English.
Interesting.
We've got this fascinating conversation to work with between John, he's an English teacher,
Yeah.
and Emma, who's a learner. She's been struggling with this, thinking in English.
Makes sense. It's fascinating how often we kind of miss that part, right? The mental process.
Right.
We're so focused on how it sounds, what it looks like, but like how we think about the language is so important.
Exactly, yeah. And John, in this conversation with Emma, really hits on that when they talk about translation.
Uh-huh.
How it's almost like a bottleneck.
Oh, yeah, like you're adding this extra step.
Yeah.
You think in your native language, then you're like, okay, got to translate that into English, and then you can speak.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like this, instead of a direct route, you have to take this detour. It slows you down.
Right, exactly. And that's not even considering, like, sentence structure and how they differ across languages.
Oh, for sure.
I could see how if you're just translating word for word,
Uh-huh.
you're going to end up with English that
English is just not going to sound natural.
not natural at all.
Yeah, and Emma, she actually shared an anecdote about how
Uh-huh.
this was really tripping her up.
Oh, wow.
She was getting stuck and hesitant, just, because she was trying to translate everything in her head.
Yeah, I bet a lot of our listeners are like nodding along right now.
Right.
Been there, done that.
Totally.
So what did John say about how to break free?
Well, he had some really interesting strategies.
Okay.
One that stood out to me was using a monolingual dictionary.
I've heard this before, but I've never really gotten it. Like,
Well-
why?
Right, why not just use a bilingual one? It's easier.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, John explained it was like a game changer for him. Looking up words in English, it forced him to really engage with the nuances, the definitions, the
Yeah.
example, things you just don't get in a bilingual dictionary.
That makes sense. So you're not relying on a direct translation.
Right.
You're understanding it within, the context of English itself.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So you're building up this network of meanings in your mind,
Right.
not just memorizing isolated translations.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so monolingual dictionary. What else?
Another key point was thinking in phrases
Okay.
rather than individual words. So learning chunks.
Okay, give me an example.
Okay, so let's say you want to say, I'm hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of translating each word separately, you learn the whole phrase, I'm hungry, as one unit.
Okay.
So that helps you internalize the flow of the language.
It's so true. We don't think, I am hungry.
Yeah. Right.
It just comes out as a whole thought.
Exactly. And he actually gave a really clear example. He was telling Emma, stop learning good morning, how are you, I am fine, as separate things.
Okay.
You learn it all as one chunk. Good morning. How are you? I am fine.
I'm good, yeah.
Right. It just gets that rhythm,
That's a great tip and something you can use right away.
Yeah.
It's like almost like, learning a phrase of music instead of each individual note.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And building on that, John also talked about, common expressions.
Yeah, like, how's it going?
Right. What's up?
What's up? Exactly.
Those everyday things that, you need them.
You need them, and they don't translate well, literally.
Oh, not at all. So, again, learning it as a whole unit.
Exactly. Absorbing those nuances, those little things that make you sound, more fluent.
Yeah, more natural.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, I want to just, take a pause. Talk to our listener for a second.
Sure.
Because we're getting into some pretty big concepts here.
Yeah.
And it can feel overwhelming, right? But don't worry, we're going to break it down, even if you're a beginner.
Absolutely. John had some great advice for that.
Okay, good. I'm ready. So where do we start?
Start simple. He suggested labeling. Just look around you, and in your head, name the objects in English, like table, window, phone.
Okay. That sounds almost too easy, but I guess it's that connection, right?
Yeah, building those pathways in your brain.
Okay.
One object at a time. And once you're okay with that,
Yeah.
you can move on to describing.
Okay, so instead of table, this is a big wooden table with 4 legs.
Exactly. You're taking that label and boom, making it a full thought.
I like that. What else?
He suggested something called narrating your day.
Narrating your day.
So you're basically giving this running commentary on your actions, but in English.
Okay, so I'm getting dressed, I'm brushing my teeth.
Yeah,
That goes
exactly.
right.
You're your own English narrator. It might feel silly,
Right.
but it works. It gets your brain used to forming those thoughts.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. This is starting to feel doable.
Right. Like, this is way different than how I learned languages back in school.
Totally. And what I like is he really stresses starting small. You don't need perfect grammar, a huge vocabulary right away.
Right.
Simple sentences are fine.
Yeah. And he had that example, right? About, like, being tired.
Oh, yes. He said instead of trying to come up with, like, I'm utterly exhausted,
Right.
just say, I am very tired.
Oh, okay.
Like, express the basic idea. Don't worry about sounding super fancy.
Fluency of thought, not just fancy vocabulary. I like that.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off, especially for beginners.
For sure.
Who might feel intimidated.
Yeah, totally.
The goal is just to get your mind thinking in English.
Yeah.
And you start with simple stuff, then you can build on it.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm liking this. So we're starting to get our minds thinking in English. Yeah, we're laying the groundwork. Excellent. So we've been talking about thinking in English, but I think there's a difference between thinking it and actually saying it out loud. Oh, yeah. Huge difference. It's like, that feeling before a presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you know your stuff cold, the thought of actually saying it can be scary.
Totally. Especially in a language you're still learning.
Right.
And actually, John and Emma talked about this, too.
They did.
I think John even suggested talking to yourself.
He did. It might sound weird, but it really works.
Really?
Yeah. Speaking out loud, even when you're alone, helps you get more fluent and builds your confidence.
Okay. But what do you actually say? Like, it can't just be random words, right?
Well, John suggests just reading out loud anything. A news article, a chapter in a book, your grocery list.
I can see that helping with pronunciation.
For sure. And getting comfortable with the sounds of English.
Yeah. Okay. So beyond reading out loud, what else can you do?
John recommends describing your surroundings. Like, give yourself a guided tour of your house or your office, but in English.
Okay. So instead of thinking chair, I might say, this is a comfortable armchair with soft blue cushions.
Exactly. You're adding details, pushing yourself to use more complex vocabulary and sentences.
It's all about turning those thoughts into spoken words.
Exactly. And speaking of turning thoughts into words, John also recommends having imaginary conversations in English.
Oh, that's interesting. Like practicing for real-life situations.
Right. Imagine you're ordering at a restaurant, asking for directions, or even giving a presentation at work.
Like a mental rehearsal.
Yeah. And it helps you get fluent and confident, but in a safe space where you can make mistakes.
Mistakes are key.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
So speaking of safe spaces, we can't forget technology.
Right.
I bet John had some thoughts on using apps and stuff for speaking practice.
He did. He knows those language learning apps have limitations, but he still thinks they're helpful.
I've used them. I mean, sometimes they feel repetitive.
Yeah.
But I guess they're good for practicing vocab and basic sentences.
That's true. It's all about using them strategically, alongside other types of practice.
Because John really emphasized that human interaction is still super important.
He did. He really encourages finding chances to speak with other English speakers online or in person.
What are some ways to do that?
Well, there are language exchange programs where you can find someone who's learning your native language.
Oh, cool.
You help each other practice.
I like that. And there are also those online communities for language learning.
Tons of them. You can connect with other learners and native speakers from all over.
That's awesome. And even if you're not ready for full conversations, you can start by leaving comments on social media in English.
Right. Or joining online discussions about things you're interested in.
Just ease into it.
Exactly.
Find what works for you.
This is all great advice, but I'm sure people will still feel stuck or discouraged sometimes.
Oh, of course. Learning a language is a journey. It has ups and downs.
Exactly.
John and Emma talked about that too, the challenges you face.
It's like being afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I think everyone feels that.
They do. But John's advice is so simple. He says, mistakes are how you know you're learning. Embrace them. Easier said than done when you're feeling self-conscious.
It is. But you have to remember it's natural to make mistakes. It's how we get better.
What about when you're worried about not being understood?
John says don't be afraid to try saying it again. Maybe use simpler words or ask for clarification.
Just be resourceful.
Right. And most people are happy to help if you just let them know you're learning.
Patience is key.
Absolutely. And if the fear of speaking is holding you back, John says start small.
Like we talked about, practicing with yourself or with friends and family.
Right. Build up your confidence little by little until you're ready for bigger challenges.
Baby steps.
Exactly. So we've covered some challenges. Now let's talk about taking your English to the next level.
Okay, I'm ready for those advanced techniques. All right, so advanced techniques time.
Yep, ready to level up.
Lay it on me. For those who are, past the basics, what did John have?
Okay, so this one might sound kind of wild. He suggested watching movies in English,
Okay.
but without subtitles.
Whoa. Okay, that's next level.
Right. I mean, think about it. You're forced to really engage.
Yeah.
Rely on your listening, the context, everything.
No crutches.
Exactly. Like, it's a true test.
Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, I've tried that with other languages,
Yeah.
and it is amazing how much more you pick up.
Right.
The pronunciation, the tone, even cultural things.
It's like those subtitles, they can kind of hold you back.
Right, yeah, you're not fully immersed.
You start to notice all these things, that subtitles might miss.
Yeah.
Like the rhythm of the language, how it flows.
It's not just about understanding the words, it's
Right.
like the music of it.
Exactly. And then John also talked about, reading books in English, but then taking it a step further, like summarizing what you read.
Oh, okay. So you're putting it into your own words.
Yeah, either out loud or writing it down.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So you're not just reading passively.
Right. You're really processing it. And it's a great way to, boost your vocab, improve how you structure sentences.
It's like you're taking the story and then creating your own version of it.
I like that, yeah. You're actively using the language, and that's key.
Okay, what else?
So along those lines, he really recommended keeping a daily journal,
Okay.
but in English.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people who are like really good at languages.
Right. It seems simple, but it makes a big difference.
It's making English a habit.
Exactly. It's part of your routine, your thoughts, like you're having a conversation with yourself, but in English.
I like that. And it doesn't have to be, super complicated writing.
No, just a few sentences about your day, what you're thinking, anything.
It's that safe space to practice.
Exactly. Try things out, make mistakes, no pressure.
Okay, so that's reading, writing, speaking.
Yep. Hitting all the skills.
Did John have anything like for the truly ambitious learners?
He did. This was his final challenge.
Okay, I'm ready.
He said, go out and find challenging words, new words, and learn them. And not just recognize them when you see them, actually use them in your speaking, in your writing.
Really push yourself.
Yeah, keep expanding that vocabulary.
Add more tools to your English toolbox.
Exactly. So all these tips, whether you're just starting out or you're more advanced, they all come back to this idea. Thinking in English is what unlocks fluency.
It's that shift, right? Not translating. It's just, it is English.
Yeah. It becomes a natural part of how you think.
It takes work, but I mean,
does.
the payoff is huge.
You understand the language better. You can express yourself better.
So for everyone out there who's working on their English, what's your final piece of advice for them?
I would say embrace the challenge. Have fun with it. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. And, never stop exploring. English is amazing. There's so much to discover.
I love that. That's a great way to end it. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing all this great advice.
My pleasure.
It's been a really fascinating dive into thinking in English.
Absolutely.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Keep practicing, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.